Yeah, we back. Now, today's video is going to be a follow-up video to the one I dropped the other day entitled, Mali Army Kills Over 80 Terrorists and the Western Media Spins the Narrative. Now, in that video, I made a reference to a recent development that occurred in Mali the other day. I believe we witnessed one of the most successful counterterrorism operations in recent history. One of the craziest counteroffensives that we've witnessed in recent times. Over 80 terrorists neutralized, sent to the afterlife in a single operation. Now, of course, this is a major story. You would think it would be plastered all over the mainstream news. It'd be all over the airwaves, right? Major victory in the fight against terrorism. Because if you notice, if you've been keeping track and paying attention, whenever the militaries in the AES, for example, whenever they take a heavy loss or a heavy defeat, these mainstream publications, they make sure to put that all over the headlines, right? I guarantee if it was 80 soldiers in the military that died, I guarantee it will be plastered all over the headlines. But how come when I look at these same publications, they're not reporting on the military victory, right? For example, when I head over to the French media, right? Let's see what the adversary talking about. When you go to the French media, they're not reporting on any victories. They're not reporting on the dozens and dozens of terrorists that lost their life on the battlefield. They got destroyed, right? When you look at the French media, the headline says, Mali and army positions are targeted in coordinated attacks, right? Now, as you can see, that headline is very vague. If you're just a casual observer and you don't really have too much information or inside knowledge or sources, you would think that the terrorists are besieging the capital of Mali at the moment, right? The terrorists are just running roughshod all over the country, right? The terrorists are just doing their thing, right? It doesn't make any mention of the dozens and hundreds of terrorists that lost their life and got destroyed. It doesn't make any reference to what happened. It just says the Malian army is under attack, right? Very vague, right? That's what the French media reported when it came to the story, right? Now, when I go over to the American media, right, ABC News, they say an Al-Qaeda group claims an attack against the Mali army, right? Very vague once again, just like the French media. Al-Qaeda attacked Mali. Right? It doesn't say Mali destroyed Al-Qaeda, right? It doesn't say what really happened. Mali destroyed Al-Qaeda. They smacked Al-Qaeda. No, they say Al-Qaeda attacked Mali, which is true. They did attack Mali, but they didn't say the full story, right? They didn't mention a counteroffensive that destroyed the entire terrorist group. You got to tell the entire story, right? You got to tell the part two. Yes, Al-Qaeda launched an attack. And then what happened? What was the result? They don't want to talk about that, right? Now, when I head over to the British media, right, the British Broadcasting Company, they said jihadist fighters stage a series of attacks on Mali military posts, right? Once again, very vague, no mention of the victory, the counteroffensive counterterrorism operation. Now, keep in mind, like I said, this was one of the most decisive and successful counterterrorism operations in recent history on the continent. And the Western media is totally brushing this off to the side. They totally brushing it off to the side, man. And that's what you call propaganda warfare, because the Western media has no interest in trying to provide any positive press for these regimes, because these regimes are deemed as hostile and adversarial regimes to the interests of certain Western governments. So they're not going to put out any positive propaganda. They're not going to go on their media and talk about, oh man, the Mali army just wiped out the terrorists. No, they're not going to talk about that. They're going to leave it very vague. The Mali army is under attack. And they're going to leave it at that, right? They're going to leave it up to you to do the research on your own and come to the real conclusion. They're not going to tell you what really happened, right? They're going to maintain their narrative, which is these nations need our assistance. These nations need our help, right? If you broadcast that these nations are catching crazy victories without you, that undermines your narrative. That undermines your interest, right? Because you want to maintain a presence on the continent. But if the militaries on the continent are able to get the job done without you, then what are you going to say? You can't come with the same speech once again. Oh, man, we got to fight terrorism. We got to cooperate. We got to coordinate with the governments. Nope. We good, bruh. So that's why, as you can see, from the French media, the American media to the British media, you notice they're all on one accord. You notice that they're all on the same page. They're all saying the same thing. They're all pushing the same message. It's almost as if they're moving as one unit, as one block, right? Advancing their common interests as a unit, as one block, right? Isn't that interesting? I just wanted to give that example, right? Another example of the adversary moving as one unit, moving as one block, moving as a collective to advance their common interests against us as a whole, right? So for those who believe that they can operate as individual fingers and go against one united fist, listen, keep dreaming, keep daydreaming, right? keep living in the clouds, right? Us who live in reality, we already know what it is, right? The rest of y'all keep living in the alternate universes. Now, I will say Al Jazeera was pretty much the only major publication that I seen that actually was somewhat not trying to push an agenda, right? Their headline said this. Al Jazeera said, the Mali army says 80 fighters were killed after earlier Al-Qaeda linked attacks, right? So the Western media, they only reported on the attack by the terrorists. They did not report on the terrorists getting routed and doing a 100-yard dash in flip-flops and going on a retreat. They did not report on the defeat, right? But Al Jazeera actually, gave the full story, right? They said, yes, earlier Al-Qaeda did attack, but 80 fighters ended up getting put on their back. That's the facts. And like I said, this undoubtedly one of the most successful counterterrorism operations on the continent in recent memory. Definitely of this year alone. Definitely one of the craziest counteroffenses I've ever seen, right? And I think the last time there was a major victory like this was when the Mali army actually killed that major Al-Qaeda commander by the name of Abu Huzaifa, right? Take a look up on the screen. If you remember, he had a $5 million bounty on his head from the United States government, right? So the United States government, they were looking up and down, looking in the closet, under the couch. They could not find this guy for years and years, right? But he was neutralized. He was vanquished by the military in Mali, I think sometime early last year, 2024, right? That was the last major victory, right? So in the last 2 years alone, and don't forget back in December when that drone strike killed, several terrorist leaders back in December. You remember that. So the military in Mali has put up some major victories under the regime of President Assimi Goïta, right? Definitely, undoubtedly, you got to give props and respect to President Assimi Goïta for how many military victories he's accomplished in the fight against terrorism. He definitely has been putting up points on the board. Definitely, for sure. Now, going back to what I said before in regards to propaganda warfare, information warfare, right? As you can see, the Western media is not here to provide, honest, credible journalism, but it's actually here to advance the interests of the governments and the nations of where they're headquartered, which is understandable. Now, when you look at what the Western media is actually reporting on now, in the past, like today, when I looked on the headlines, they're talking about President Assimi Goïta. He needs to organize elections, right? They're talking about elections. After one of the craziest military victories on the continent in the fight against terrorism, the Western media is calling for elections against President Assimi Goïta, right? Take a look up on the screen. This is the French media, right? The Mali junta chief granted a 5-year term in power, which is renewable as many times as necessary, right? Now, as you can see, instead of giving President Assimi Goïta the proper respect and homage that he deserves, instead, they're focused on regime change, right? They're focused on organizing elections while the nation is currently at war, right? Just the other day, they said Al-Qaeda just attacked the country, but now they're talking about organizing elections. You cannot organize elections when Al-Qaeda is attacking the country. I'm sorry to tell you. I'm sorry to tell you. You cannot organize free and fair, organized and credible elections when Al-Qaeda is launching attacks against the country. I'm sorry to tell you, yes, we cannot organize elections at this current moment in time. But let me tell you why they're really mad. Let me tell you why they're focused on regime change, right? Take a look up on the screen. All these articles came out in the past month. Mali takes control of a Canadian-owned Barrick gold mine over tax dispute. You already know we've been talking about that on the channel, right? Take a look up on the screen. Mali takes control of one of Africa's largest gold mines and launches its own refinery. Take a look up on the screen. Mali will hold a 62% stake in the first national gold refinery. The government of Mali will hold a 62% stake in the country's first national gold refinery, according to a decree adopted by the Council of Ministers on May 28, 2025. The project, developed in partnership with a Russian company, is expected to have an annual processing capacity of 200 tons of gold. Now, the current price of gold currently sits at $3,346. Now, if they're currently in the process of building a refinery that can process up to 200 tons of gold, that's about $22 billion revenue total a year. Once you split it 62-38, that's about $13 billion that goes to the government. Now, before the arrival of President Assimi Goïta, the gold sector didn't generate that much revenue previously, right? I don't think they even generated like $1 billion a year. If they did, it definitely wasn't a lot. It was probably like 1 billion, maybe 2 billion at most. It wasn't like crazy numbers. Now, under this new refinery, the government is now going to be generating over 10 billion, right? So as you can see, the profits and revenue under the regime of President Assimi Goïta is projected to skyrocket. As you can see, now we see why the adversary is calling for elections and regime change, right? Now we understand why they're clamoring for regime change. And don't forget, back in the end of 2023, Captain IBRAHIM TRAORE already began his own construction of a gold refinery in Burkina Faso. That would make the second gold refinery in the territorial space of the AES, right? So 2 gold refineries, 1 under construction and 1 basically finished. Now, why on God's green earth would we be organizing elections when we currently have gold refineries under construction, when we currently marching on the terrorists, smacking up the terrorists, sending them to hell? Why would we organize elections when we have things to do? We have things to do. We got things to take care of. And this guy talking about elections. Man, get out of here, guy. Elections. This guy's comedy. He talk about elections. Listen, brother, we got things to do. Call us back in like 5 years, right? 2030, holla back. But in the meantime, please stop talking about elections, right? We are not going to elections. President Assimi Goïta. And listen, because I know that they have guys who are close to them in their entourage that watch my channel and listen to my videos. Listen, we not going to elections. We have things to do. We have things to do. Nations who are at war do not go to elections. Nations who have national projects currently underway are not organizing elections. We have things to do, right? Elections, elections. We are not going to elections. Anyways, I want to give the same example as I did before, right? As you can see, the French media, instead of congratulating President Assimi Goïta for the formidable victory against the terrorists, they're instead calling for elections. They're instead clamoring for elections, right? Now, when you go over to the British media, the British Broadcasting Company, right? They're saying the same exact thing, the same exact message. They're all moving as one voice, right? Take a look at this headline. The Mali coup leader granted a 5-year term in power, right? And of course, when you go into the article, they're talking about Mali's military leader, General Assimi Goïta, has been granted a 5-year presidential term by the transitional parliament, which is renewable without elections. The junta leader, who has seized power twice, had promised the return of democracy last year, but it never materialized, right? They're talking about we need to return democracy. Like I said before, we have things on the agenda, and these guys are talking about democracy. Listen, we have gold refineries under construction. Please take that democracy, put it to the side for a few years, brother. We have things to do. We have things to do, right? We just marched on the terrorists, just danced on the terrorists, right? We just diddy bopped on the terrorists. We danced compa on the terrorists, and now we have things to do. So no, elections is not at the top of the agenda. Nations who are currently in this phase of redevelopment and rebuilding and rebranding, elections, it's not the time for elections, right? It's not the time for elections. That's how you disturb the political process. That's how you disturb these projects, because what if the next leader that comes into power, what if he does not continue with the projects? What if he does not continue with the gold refinery? What if he does not continue with the military changes that were made that made it possible to where now the terrorists are getting smoked, 80 kills in a single attack? What if the next leader does not continue where Assimi Goïta left off, right? That goes back to what I say about the importance of political continuity. The reason why they're clamoring for elections is because they're trying to get a different leader in power that's going to acquiesce, that's going to play ball, that's going to capitulate to their demands, that's going to actually be compatible with their interests, right? That's going to come sit at the table and sign the deal, right? Assimi Goïta, he not signing the deal, right? Just last week, he was in Moscow, so you already know. And then right after that, we saw the 80 kill, terrorist operation. So that's why they're on all their media saying the same exact thing. Elections, 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 right? Even when you go to the German media, the Germans don't even got nothing to do with this. But look at the German media, right? The Mali junta continues to undermine democracy, right? Who cares about democracy? We have things to do. But anyways, as you can see, the adversary's obviously upset. That's why they're not reporting on the victory, because they don't want to report on the fact that, wow, the African regimes can get victories without us. Damn. That's a blow to their ego. Damn, the African governments can achieve things without us. We're not really as important as we proclaim ourselves to be. Damn, right? Wow, they crushed 80 terrorists in a single operation, and they're building refineries. Damn. They done 10x their profits and revenues. Damn. Regime change, elections. Right. Anyways, man, it's your boy Neferkari Saline. Back in the Billy, yes indeed. Cash App in the description. Support the channel, support the Patreon, NTD 1814. Support the album. Go to my homepage, go to my playlist section. Support the album. Enjoy the album. And I'm gone. Peace. Told me she loved me and said that it's real. So independent, ain't signing no deal. Feel like a king and I'm up in Cap Henry. I'm in the citadel, top of the hill. Trying to run up but we let off a cannon. Secret location, I'm keeping it sealed. You ain't retaliate, Franco Medina came to the country and he got killed. You ain't retaliate, Rafi Mans. Thought you was loyal, thought you was real. Didn't even wanna come pick up the body. Had your man locked up, he died in the cell. Up at the palace, I'm throwing a party. Right on the south and I'm giving them hell. And my little shorty, she looking exotic. African features, she casting a spell. Run to the check like I work on my fitness. Wake up each morning and handle my business. Say that she love me, she want my genetics. Wanna get married and make it official. Wanna get married and have my babies. Up in the city, I'm riding Mercedes. Up in the city, they treat me like royalty. Feeling like Dolph, talking about lords. Spreading my wings and I had to get fly. Up in the top, an incredible vibe. Came from the bottom, I'm up in the sky. Gave one look and said, baby, you fine. Wake up each morning and handle my business. They just be talking, you see me, I live it. Ride on my enemies, sounding like thunder. 1804, got that shit in my spirit. 1804 when I step in the building. 1804, and that's word of my mother. Rock my women and die for my brother. Never gon' fall when I'm deep under pressure. Tell them we back and they better accept it. Move like a king, every step is divine. Ride on my enemies with no exception. Taking revenge and I'm taking what's mine. Pour up a drink and it's time that we toast. Watching my back, keep my enemies close. Only the family, I stick with my brothers. Cannons position outside of the coast. Heavy artillery for the protection. Move like a general, stick to the code. Feel like a king when I'm up in the north. Beautiful women, they trying to get chose. Launch an invasion all over the south. Capture the capital with all my woes. Look at my energy and my demeanor. Dripping that ice and that's head to my toes. Lately I'm flexing all on the Americans. Flexing my muscle on missing my road. Just got a carriage just coming from London. Boy, that shit cash, I ain't taking no loans. Boy, that shit cash, that's fresh on the boat. Enemy know I got millions in gold. Enemy know I got choppers and cannons. How did I do it? They can't understand it. How did I do it? It's cause I'm relentless. Call me King Harry, my name is cemented. Call me King Harry, I'm up in the palace. Call me King Harry, I'm raising the status.